So emotional intelligence is something that was made popular by a guy named Daniel Goleman. And just by way of a little bit of history, back in the early 1900s, 1920s, a guy named Thorndike actually started to notice that there were other forms of intelligence aside from cognitive intelligence, rational thinking intelligence. And over time, they looked at many different kinds of intelligence. And then in the 1990s, some researchers at Harvard came up with the term emotional intelligence. And by the mid-1990s, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Goleman was the person who popularized emotional intelligence, wrote a few best-selling books and workbooks, and essentially the 5 key elements of emotional intelligence, which are so critical for engaging with other people, are, number 1, self-knowledge and self-awareness. Self-knowledge is knowing who you are, what you're about. An example of how you acquire self-knowledge would be taking an instrument like a Myers-Briggs instrument, or a relationship strategies instrument, or an insight inventory, or a DISC instrument, and getting some insight and some knowledge of who you are. Self-awareness, which is kind of an aspect of it, is knowing what's going on for you at any moment in time. Are you agitated and upset? Are you angry? Are you stressed about something? And it's critical to have that sense of awareness, because if you don't have that sense of awareness, our communication gets a little bit quirky with other people. So self-knowledge, self-awareness. The second key element is self-regulation. Being able to control your behavior, to choose your behavior. Without self-regulation, self-awareness doesn't mean a whole lot. Self-motivation is the third key element. Self-motivation, our capacity to choose what is it that's important to us. What are our priorities? What are our goals and objectives? What is it that we want to accomplish? So those are the kind of the 3 key elements, and those first 3 elements of emotional intelligence really relate to the self, relate to the individual. The 4th critical element of emotional intelligence is empathy. Care and concern for other people. Having a level of awareness of who they are and what's going on for them at any moment in time. In other words, we need to move out of kind of just a self-interested perspective, but have an understanding of who other people are and have a positive regard for them. One of my favorite ways of explaining that aspect of emotional intelligence is to reference a guy by the name of Martin Buber, who wrote a book in the 1920s called I, Thou. I, Thou. Thou being kind of an old English honorific. Buber called I-thou relationships subjective relationships, or subject-based, meaning there's an emphasis on who is the individual over there. And what happens in a lot of kind of modern business transaction is we think of the other person as an it, okay? As opposed to an I-thou, we have I-it relationships, which are objective relationships. What's their title or position? How might they advantage us? Not seeing that other as a real human being. So that's kind of the 4th element. And the 5th element of emotional intelligence are social skills, our capacity to communicate to others, to be diplomatic and tactful, to create teams, to resolve conflict, to engage in authentic conversations so that we can create good collaborative partnerships with others.